White cops frame black woman unaware she's a FBI agent. The night was calm in the quiet town of Arlington, Virginia. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the nearly deserted roads. The occasional hum of a passing car was the only sound breaking the silence. Alicia Monroe sat behind the wheel of her sleek black SUV, her hand steady on the steering wheel. The day had been long, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. Her undercover work in this small town was nearing its end. She had everything she needed to complete her mission. As she drove through the suburban streets, she kept her mind sharp, her senses alert. Years of experience as an undercover CIA operative had trained her to always be aware of her surroundings. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. As she approached a quiet intersection, she slowed down, her sharp eyes catching the reflective stop sign ahead. Her instincts always made her double-check things, but there was nothing unusual about this turn. She came to a complete stop, glanced left and right, then proceeded forward. Then, flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Alicia's heartbeat remained steady. She wasn't afraid. She had been trained for moments like this. Still, she found it odd. She had done nothing wrong. She pulled over to the side of the road and turned off the engine. As she reached for her glove compartment to retrieve her license and registration, she kept a close watch on the approaching officers. 2 men emerged from the patrol car. The driver, Officer Darren Cole, was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the arrogance of a man used to getting his way. His partner, Officer Matthew Briggs, was shorter, stockier, and had a perpetual smirk on his face, the kind that made Alicia's instincts tingle with warning. Cole approached first, shining his flashlight into her car window, the beam sweeping across her face and the interior. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice laced with authority. "You know why I pulled you over tonight?" Alicia met his gaze without hesitation. "No, officer. I wasn't speeding, and I made a full stop at the intersection." Cole's lips curled into a small, condescending smile. "Actually, you didn't," he said. "You rolled right through it. That's a moving violation." Alicia's brow furrowed ever so slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm certain I stopped." "License and registration," Cole interrupted, his tone suddenly hard. Without hesitation, she handed over her documents. She knew better than to argue. When dealing with power-hungry men like these, it was often best to let them think they were in control, at least for now. Cole took the documents and studied them carefully. "Virginia plates, local address," he muttered. "You live around here?" Alicia nodded. "Yes, officer." Just then, his partner Briggs, who had been standing near the rear of her vehicle, suddenly called out, "Hey, Cole, you might want to take a look back here." Alicia's jaw tightened slightly as she caught a glimpse of Briggs through her side mirror. He was pointing toward her trunk, his voice low and conspiratorial. Cole handed her documents back without another word. "Stay in the car," he ordered before turning to join Briggs. Alicia watched them closely in her mirror. She saw the way Briggs gestured dramatically toward the trunk, his smug expression growing wider. Cole nodded, and the two exchanged a glance that sent a flicker of unease through her chest. Alicia wasn't afraid, but she recognized the warning signs of a setup. Moments later, Cole returned to her window, his expression suddenly grim. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Alicia tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but questioning. "May I ask why, officer?" "We have reason to believe you're in possession of illegal substances," Cole replied, his voice clipped, almost rehearsed. Alicia's eyes narrowed. "Illegal substances?" she repeated. "I think you've made a mistake." "We'll see about that," Cole said, stepping back and gesturing for her to exit the vehicle. Alicia exhaled slowly, keeping her composure. She had done nothing wrong, but this was no ordinary traffic stop. She had been targeted. Suppressing a sigh, she opened the door and stepped out, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she had all the time in the world. As she stood there, Officer Briggs theatrically lifted her trunk and gestured toward a small unmarked bag sitting conspicuously near the edge. "Well, what do you know?" Briggs said with mock surprise. "A bag of powdery goodness." Alicia's eyes flicked to the bag and then back to the officers, her face unreadable. Inside, her mind was already working rapidly, cataloging every detail. The bag hadn't been there when she left her house. She was sure of it. This was a setup. Cole moved closer, his smirk widening. Anything you want to tell us, ma'am? Alicia's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, a subtle, calculated expression that conveyed neither fear nor guilt. I'll save my comments for the appropriate setting, she said coolly. Cole chuckled, clearly interpreting her calm as arrogance. Oh, you'll have your chance, he sneered. You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute. Briggs moved in to cuff her. Alicia didn't resist, her gaze steady and unflinching. You're making a big mistake, she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet intensity that made Briggs hesitate for half a second before snapping the cuffs into place. Yeah, we'll see, Cole said, leading her toward the squad car. Let's see how confident you are in front of a judge. As they drove away, Alicia gazed out the window, her mind already spinning through her options. The two officers thought they had won, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. And soon enough they would regret ever pulling her over. The interior of the police cruiser was dimly lit, the glow of passing streetlights casting fleeting streaks of light across Alicia Monroe's face. She sat in the back seat, her wrists cuffed behind her, her posture as composed as ever. The cold metal pressed into her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind was already at work, processing, analyzing, waiting. In the front seat, Officers Darren Cole and Matthew Briggs chuckled to themselves as they drove down the quiet streets. To them, this was routine. Another easy arrest, another unchallenged victory. They had done this before, and they had gotten away with it every time. What they didn't realize was that tonight they had made a grave mistake. Cole glanced at Alicia through the rearview mirror, his smirk widening. You're awfully quiet back there, he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Most people start begging or making excuses by now. Alicia met his gaze in the mirror, her expression unreadable. Should I? She asked, her tone calm. Briggs let out a short laugh. Oh, we've had all kinds. Pleaders, criers, the ones who try to act all tough. But you're a little different, huh? He turned slightly in his seat to look at her. What do you think, Cole? We got ourselves one of those silent types? Cole nodded as he took a slow right turn. Yeah, I think so. You know what that means, right? He asked, directing the question toward Briggs. Briggs grinned. Oh yeah, means she's hiding something. Alicia didn't take the bait. She remained still, her breathing even. She knew exactly what they were doing, trying to rattle her, to make her slip up, to make her panic. They were used to seeing fear. She gave them nothing. Got nothing to say? Cole pressed. No, officer? This is a mistake? No sob story about how you're innocent? Alicia tilted her head slightly as if considering his words. Then, in a voice as smooth as glass, she said, You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Cole chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, I've heard it all before. I don't know how that bag got in my car. I swear, officer, I don't even do drugs. He mimicked in a high-pitched mocking tone before laughing. Ain't that right, Briggs? Briggs snorted. Yeah, every damn time. Alicia didn't react. Instead, she shifted her attention to her surroundings. The route they were taking was deliberate, not a straight path to the station. A detour. Interesting. She filed the detail away in her mind, storing it with everything else. Their tones, their body language, the way they kept glancing at each other like they were sharing an inside joke. It was sloppy, overconfident. These men weren't just corrupt, they were arrogant about it. Alicia knew arrogance could be exploited. Cole glanced at the mirror again, his smirk fading slightly when he saw that she wasn't giving him the reaction he wanted. All right, since you're not much of a talker, how about this? I give you one chance to make this easier on yourself, he said, his voice lowering slightly. You cooperate, you tell us where the rest of your stash is, and maybe, just maybe, we put in a good word for you. Alicia's expression didn't change. How generous, she murmured. Briggs turned to face her more fully. We got everything we need to put you away, he said smugly. That bag? It's enough to get you at least 10 years, easy. Maybe more, if the DA really wants to make an example out of you. Alicia gave him a slow, measured look. That bag doesn't belong to me. Cole let out an exaggerated sigh. And there it is, the classic denial. He shook his head, exchanging a knowing glance with Briggs. You'd be surprised how many times we've heard that. Alicia leaned back against the seat, tilting her head just slightly. Then, with absolute certainty, she said, "You'd be surprised how many times I've heard men like you say that." The car fell into silence. For the first time, Briggs's smirk faltered. Cole's grip on the wheel tightened ever so slightly. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know that she had spent years infiltrating criminal organizations, sitting across from far more dangerous men than them, men who would make them crumble in an instant. They thought they were in control, but they weren't, not even close. Cole cleared his throat, forcing a grin. "You know, you keep up that attitude and the judge is gonna love you. Real cooperative type." Alicia's lips barely curled into a smile. "Oh, I don't think you'll want me anywhere near a judge." Briggs frowned. "And why's that?" Alicia held his gaze, her dark eyes calm but unyielding. "Because when the truth comes out, you're going to wish you never put me in this car." Briggs scoffed, but there was something uneasy in his expression now. "Yeah, okay," he muttered, turning back around. Cole exhaled sharply. "She thinks she's special," he said, shaking his head. "She's just like all the rest." Alicia didn't respond, because she knew better. This was going to be different. They just didn't know it yet. The Arlington Police Department station was small but bustling, a tight-knit unit where everyone knew everyone. The scent of burnt coffee and cheap paper filled the air, the hum of police scanners providing a constant background noise. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the scuffed linoleum floors, their flickering barely noticed by the officers who had spent years under them. As the station doors swung open, Officers Darren Cole and Matthew Briggs walked in with an air of confidence, guiding Alicia Monroe between them. To them, this was just another routine booking, another name in the system. They barely noticed the looks exchanged between some of the younger officers as they made their way toward the booking desk. At the front desk, a young officer, Eric Lawson, barely out of the academy, sat typing up an incident report. He looked up at the sound of footsteps, his hazel eyes widening slightly as he took in the sight before him. A woman in expensive, well-fitted clothing, walking calmly between two grinning officers. He had seen plenty of arrests since joining the force, but something about this one felt off. Cole reached the desk and dropped a small, unmarked bag of white powder onto the counter with a dramatic thud. "Got ourselves a big one tonight," he announced smugly. "Caught her with this in the trunk. Intent to distribute." Lawson's brows knitted together. He glanced at Alicia, then at the bag. Something in his gut twisted. She didn't look like a dealer. Not that it mattered, or at least that's what he was supposed to tell himself. Still, he hesitated. "Name?" Lawson asked, clearing his throat. Alicia's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Alicia Monroe." "Address?" She recited it smoothly, her tone unreadable. Lawson typed the information into the system, his fingers moving slower than usual. He was trying to shake the feeling gnawing at him. Something wasn't right. He looked back up at her. Most people in this situation would be fidgeting, panicking, protesting their innocence. Instead, she stood straight, her expression cool and unreadable. That wasn't normal. Before he could ask another question, Briggs leaned against the counter, shaking his head. "Let's speed this up, huh, kid?" "Got other paperwork to get to." Lawson nodded and quickly printed out the necessary forms. He handed them over to Cole, who scribbled his signature lazily before looking back at Alicia. "This is the part where you start thinking real hard about your future," he said. "You cooperate, maybe you don't spend the next decade in a cell." Alicia met his gaze evenly. "And this is the part where you start thinking real hard about your career." Cole chuckled. "Oh, I think I'll be just fine." Briggs joined in the laughter, but Lawson wasn't laughing. Instead, he was staring at the bag of powder still sitting on the desk. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he prepared to log it into evidence. Then something clicked. There was no entry in the system for it. That wasn't procedure. He glanced at Cole and Briggs, who were now laughing and exchanging jokes. Neither of them seemed particularly interested in the bag anymore. That was odd. Lawson swallowed. Maybe it was just a mistake, a clerical error. But then he remembered something else. The way they'd walked in. The way they'd looked at each other like they were in on a joke that no one else knew. His fingers moved on autopilot, opening the database. He quickly pulled up past arrests made by Cole and Briggs, and what he saw made his stomach drop. A pattern. A disturbing, undeniable pattern. Case after case, all eerily similar, minor traffic violations escalating into drug charges. All the defendants were black. All the charges followed the same vague wording. All the evidence had been logged by Cole and Briggs. Lawson's breath caught in his throat. He looked up again, watching the way the two officers carried themselves, their smug confidence, the easy way they leaned against the counter like they owned the place. Because they did. The realization made him feel sick. But what could he do? His position in the department was fragile. He was a rookie. He had no authority, no power. If he spoke up, he'd be marked. No promotions, no backup on calls. Maybe even worse. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling in his gut. Alicia watched him carefully, sensing his hesitation. He was young, uncertain, but not entirely gone. There was a part of him that still believed in the badge, in justice. And that was exactly what she needed. She took a slow breath and leaned in slightly, just enough to make him hear her next words. "I don't belong here," she said softly, "and you know it." Lawson stiffened. His eyes flicked to hers. For a second, just a second, he considered asking her something. But before he could, Cole clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. "All right, kid. She's all yours. Get her booked. Throw her in holding. Maybe she'll come to her senses after a few hours." Lawson nodded stiffly and led Alicia away toward the cells. But as she walked down the dimly lit corridor, she could feel it. The first crack. It was small, but it was there. Inside her holding cell, Alicia remained still. The cold metal bench against the wall was uncomfortable, but she had endured worse. Far worse. She had spent years in hostile territories waiting for extraction, sitting in windowless rooms with no contact, biding her time while enemies unknowingly walked into their own downfall. This was nothing. She let her gaze drift toward the security camera positioned in the upper corner of the cell. They were watching her. Good. She wanted them to. Her ears picked up faint conversations outside, the officers chatting, laughing, sipping their terrible coffee. But she listened for one voice in particular. Lawson, the rookie. She had seen the hesitation in his eyes earlier. He was thinking, questioning. That was the first step. She needed him to take the second. With a slow, deliberate breath, she shifted her position, just enough to make herself appear even calmer. Not like someone falsely accused, not like someone panicked, but like someone who knew something no one else did. That was always the trick. People feared certainty more than they feared anger. Lawson's doubt grows. Lawson rubbed his temples, staring at his screen. His gut screamed that something was wrong, but what could he do? If he went to his sergeant with only his feelings, he'd get laughed out of the room. Worse, he'd get put on traffic duty for the next 6 months. He needed proof. He hesitated for only a second before clicking on Cole and Briggs's body cam footage from the arrest. His hands tensed. The footage loaded. The dashboard cam showed Alicia making a perfect stop at the intersection. No rolling stop. No hesitation. Then, the flashing lights appeared behind her. Lawson frowned. Cole had claimed she ran the stop sign, but the footage didn't lie. His chest tightened. He skipped ahead. The moment came when Briggs discovered the drugs in Alicia's trunk. Lawson squinted. He replayed the footage again, slowed it down. Then he saw it. Briggs leaned into the trunk for half a second, his hand moving subtly toward the edge, before pulling back with the bag. Lawson's breath caught. That was not a discovery. That was a placement. His pulse hammered in his ears. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. Alicia Monroe was being framed. And suddenly, he was part of it. Tension rises. Lawson's hands were sweaty. He wiped them on his uniform, his mind racing. He should report this. But to who? His commanding officer? The same people who had been signing off on every single one of these cases? The same ones who had probably ignored other rookies who had noticed the pattern, number? If he went to the wrong person, this wouldn't just go away. It would come back on him. And then he'd be the one getting railroaded. He swallowed hard. A low chuckle caught his attention. He looked up. Cole and Briggs were standing near the break room, drinking coffee, laughing, like this was all a joke to them. Lawson's stomach twisted. Did they even think twice about the lives they were destroying? Did they ever lose sleep over it? They were comfortable, because they had never been challenged. His fists clenched. For the first time since joining the force, he wasn't sure who he was working for. Lawson took a deep breath. His decision was made. His fingers moved to the keyboard. Instead of logging the evidence like he was supposed to, he opened an encrypted email system. He attached the body cam footage. 2. Anonymous Internal Affairs tip line. Subject: urgent. Possible evidence tampering. Message: you need to see this. Now. He hesitated for only a second. Then he hit send. The message disappeared. His pulse didn't slow. He had done it. But something told him this was just the beginning. The air in Alicia Monroe's holding cell remained still, yet every second was a countdown. She was not trapped. She was waiting. Waiting for the signal. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for them to realize exactly who they had just arrested. She shifted slightly on the cold bench, her hands resting on her lap. Beneath the thick fabric of her jacket's hem, her fingertips brushed against a small embedded device. It was no bigger than a button, carefully concealed in the lining of her coat. A CIA-issued emergency tracker. A silent distress beacon. A single press. That was all it took. Alicia exhaled slowly, masking the movement as she subtly pressed her thumb against the device. No sound, no flash, no vibration. But the signal had been sent. Far away, somewhere in a secure government building, a red light blinked to life on a control panel. A man in a dark suit seated in front of the screen glanced at it and immediately straightened. His fingers danced over the keyboard, confirming the signal's origin. The system recognized the beacon instantly. Agent Alicia Monroe. Active distress call. Immediate response required. He picked up the phone, his voice sharp and precise. We have a situation. Within minutes, Alicia's team was mobilizing. Inside the police station, doubt creeps in. Officer Eric Lawson sat at his desk, his knee bouncing anxiously. He had just sent the anonymous tip with the damning body cam footage, and now he couldn't take it back. His gut twisted as he stole a glance toward Officers Darren Cole and Matthew Briggs, who were still in the break room, oblivious to what was coming. Lawson swallowed hard. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? But in a station like this, right didn't always mean safe. He tapped his fingers against his desk, debating his next move. He had one more suspicion: the bag of drugs. Something about it had nagged at him ever since he watched the footage. The way Briggs had moved too quickly, the way the bag had been too perfectly placed. He glanced toward the evidence locker. If they were setting people up, they wouldn't just rely on planting drugs at the scene. They'd need a supply. Lawson stood. He was about to break the one rule every rookie was taught. Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. But it was too late for that. The evidence room. A disturbing discovery. The hallway was quiet as Lawson slipped into the evidence room. Rows of shelves stretched in front of him, filled with numbered bins and locked compartments. The security camera above the door blinked red, recording, as always. He moved carefully. If anyone asked, he would pretend to be organizing files. His fingers skimmed over the logs, searching for Alicia Monroe's arrest entry. There. Case ID 0372-M suspect, Alicia Monroe. Charge, drug possession. Evidence, one small bag of unknown substance. He followed the corresponding number to the storage shelf, his heart pounding. Then he saw it. The bag. But it wasn't sealed. Lawson's breath hitched. Every piece of drug evidence was supposed to be logged, labeled, and sealed upon entry. But this bag, it was slightly open, like someone had just thrown it in there. He carefully reached for it, examining the outside. The edges were creased, smudged, handled too many times. Lawson knew enough to recognize a staged piece of evidence. The realization hit him like a truck. This was bigger than just one case. This wasn't just about Alicia Monroe. This was systemic. Cole and Briggs had been doing this for years. How many innocent people had they locked away? Lawson took a sharp breath and stepped back. He needed to get out of here before someone noticed him, but he was already too late. A shadow loomed behind him. Confrontation. What the hell do you think you're doing? Lawson's stomach dropped. He turned slowly to find Officer Cole standing in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. For a second, neither of them spoke. Lawson's mind raced. His excuse, his cover story, it had to be good. "I was just checking a log discrepancy," Lawson said, keeping his voice even. Cole's eyes flicked to the bag in Lawson's hand. His smirk returned, but this time there was a dangerous edge to it. "That's so," he drawled. Lawson nodded, hoping Cole wouldn't push further. But the silence stretched. Then Cole stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You're new here, kid," he murmured, "so let me give you some advice." His voice was calm but threatening. "Mind your business." Lawson's jaw tightened. Cole patted him on the shoulder like a friend. "You don't want to be on the wrong side of this." And just like that, Cole walked out. "Hey!" Leaving Lawson standing there holding the proof in his hands. The team mobilizes. Across town, black SUVs sped down an empty road, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Inside one of them, Special Agent Michael Warren sat with a secure tablet in his lap, reviewing the case file on Alicia Monroe. "She triggered the distress signal 15 minutes ago," an agent beside him said. "She knew this was a setup," Warren replied. "She was waiting for us to act." He swiped through the file, scanning Cole and Briggs' arrest history. It was worse than he thought. "Time to bring the hammer down," Warren muttered. He clicked his earpiece. "Approach quiet. We want them alive for questioning." The FBI convoy neared the police station. Inside, Alicia Monroe sat in her cell listening closely. Then she heard it. The distant rumble of engines. The cavalry was here. A small, satisfied smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It was time to end this. The quiet hum of the Arlington police station was suddenly shattered by the arrival of black SUVs rolling into the parking lot. Their engines rumbled, their tinted windows hiding the agents inside, but the golden FBI badges flashed under the streetlights as the doors swung open. Special Agent Michael Warren stepped out first. He adjusted his suit, his face unreadable. Behind him, a team of federal agents moved with silent precision, each step calculated. Inside the station, the atmosphere shifted. The officers at the front desk glanced up, confusion flashing across their faces as the federal agents strode through the entrance. The station was no stranger to law enforcement visitors, but this was different. This wasn't a casual check-in. This was a storm rolling in. Warren walked straight to the desk sergeant, his voice calm but firm. "We need access to your holding cells." Shockwaves through the station. The request sent a ripple through the room. Officers stopped mid-conversation, their eyes darting toward the visitors. A few exchanged nervous glances. The energy shifted. At a corner desk, Officer Eric Lawson sat frozen, his hands clenched into fists. They came. The FBI was here. His tip-off hadn't gone unnoticed, but he wasn't the only one who noticed. Across the bullpen, Officers Darren Cole and Matthew Briggs stiffened. Their relaxed posture vanished as soon as they saw the agents. Briggs swallowed hard, whispering under his breath, "Shit!" Cole, however, kept his face blank, his mind racing. Stay calm, stay in control. He stood slowly, adjusting his belt as he glanced toward the hallway leading to the evidence room. Briggs shot him a panicked look. "What do we do?" he muttered. Cole didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the exit, calculating. But they were already trapped. The moment of reckoning. Agent Warren turned his steely gaze toward the sergeant. "Now." The sergeant hesitated, but the weight of the moment pressed down on him. The feds weren't asking. They were taking. He motioned for an officer to unlock the back hallway. "Right this way, Agent." Alicia Monroe sat in her holding cell, her expression unreadable as she listened to the sounds of heavy boots approaching. She had been waiting for this moment. The buzz of the security lock filled the hallway. The door swung open. Warren stepped into view, his dark eyes locking onto hers. There was a flicker of understanding between them, two professionals who had played their roles perfectly. He nodded. "Miss Monroe, you're free to go." Cole and Briggs realize it's over. As Alicia stepped out of her cell, Officer Cole and Officer Briggs watched in stunned silence. Briggs took a step back, sweat forming at his temple. What the hell is happening?" Warren turned toward them, his expression unreadable. "You tell me, officer." Cole clenched his jaw. "We did nothing wrong." Warren smirked, pulling a folder from his coat. That's funny, because we have evidence that says otherwise. The room fell silent. Lawson felt his breath catch. The entire bullpen was watching. The officers who had once laughed along with Cole and Briggs now shifted uneasily. Whispers spread like wildfire. Evidence? Against them. This wasn't just about one arrest. This was something bigger. Warren dropped the folder onto a nearby desk. It slid across the surface, stopping inches from Cole's hand. Inside were photos, documents, surveillance footage, everything they had tried to hide. Warren leaned in slightly, his voice cold. "How many innocent people have you locked up?" Briggs' face drained of color. His hands trembled. Cole, however, wasn't ready to go down quietly. He squared his shoulders, forcing a smirk. "This is bullshit. But before he could finish, a loud click echoed through the station. One of the agents had unholstered his weapon, not to use it, just as a reminder. Cole went silent. For the first time, he realized what was happening. They weren't getting out of this. The final move. Agent Warren didn't blink. He nodded toward one of his men. "Place them under arrest." The words hit like a hammer. The station, once filled with casual banter, was now dead silent. Officers turned, watching in disbelief as their own colleagues were about to be taken down. Briggs stumbled back. "You can't do this," he stammered. "We're cops." The federal agent in front of him didn't flinch. "Not anymore." The sound of handcuffs locking into place sent a chill through the room. Cole and Briggs were led away, their faces pale. They had spent years framing others. Now, they were the ones being dragged out in cuffs. Alicia's quiet victory. As the doors slammed shut behind them, Alicia Monroe stood tall. She turned to Officer Lawson, the young rookie who had risked everything. For the first time, he met her gaze without hesitation. Alicia's expression softened. She stepped closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You made the right choice." Lawson swallowed hard, but this time he didn't look away. "So did you, ma'am." Alicia nodded once. Then, without another word, she turned toward the exit, walking out of the station. Into the night, into freedom, into her next mission, and behind her, the corrupt empire of Cole and Briggs was collapsing. Justice had arrived, and it was only the beginning. The air inside the Arlington police station was thick with tension. Officers exchanged nervous glances, their whispers filling the bullpen. No one had ever seen anything like this. The FBI was here, and they weren't leaving without making arrests. In the interrogation room, Officers Darren Cole and Matthew Briggs sat across from Special Agent Michael Warren and two federal investigators. The once confident officers were noticeably rattled, their postures stiff as they struggled to maintain their composure. On the table between them was a thick case file, its pages filled with evidence collected over weeks of investigation. Surveillance footage, audio recordings, falsified reports. All of it pointed to one undeniable truth. They had framed innocent people. They had framed Alicia Monroe, and now the game was over. Agent Warren leaned back in his chair, calm but predatory. He flipped open the case file, slowly pushing a photo across the table. It was grainy surveillance footage, but it was enough. Cole and Briggs standing at the back of Alicia's SUV, and more importantly, the unmarked bag already in their hands. Cole's smirk faltered for the first time. Briggs swallowed hard, his face paling. "Would you like to explain this?" Warren asked, his voice like a blade cutting through the silence. Cole sat up straighter, trying to recover. "We found that in her car." His voice was even, but his hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Warren tilted his head, almost amused. "Found it? You mean the same bag that we have footage of you holding before you even opened her trunk?" Briggs let out a sharp breath, his leg bouncing under the table. This doesn't mean anything," he muttered. "You can't prove anything." Warren smirked and tapped the file. "Oh, I think we can." He pulled out another sheet, a transcript of an audio recording. He didn't even need to read it aloud. The bolded words at the bottom were enough to send chills through the room. "She's just another one. No one's going to believe her over us." Briggs froze. Cole's jaw clenched. Warren took his time watching them squirm. "We have the recording. We have video proof. And thanks to a certain officer in your own department." Warren slid another file across the table, this time filled with records of past falsified arrests. "We also have a witness." Cole's eyes darted to the door. He knew. Someone had turned on them. Lawson steps up. Outside the interrogation room, Officer Eric Lawson stood near the bullpen, his hands clenched into fists. He had spent hours wrestling with his decision. He had tried to push away the doubt, to tell himself that this wasn't his fight. But Alicia Monroe's words haunted him. "You always have a choice." And now, standing beside two FBI agents, he realized he had already made it. The door opened. Agent Warren stepped out and motioned toward him. "It's time." Lawson swallowed the lump in his throat and walked forward, every step feeling heavier than the last. He entered the room, his presence sending a shockwave through the two seated officers. Cole's eyes burned with rage. "You little rat!" Lawson ignored him. Instead, he turned to Warren. "I'll testify," he said, his voice steady. "I've seen what they've done. I've seen the patterns." Briggs panicked. "Eric, listen to me," he blurted out. "You don't understand how things work. "I understand just fine," Lawson cut him off, "and I refuse to be a part of it anymore." Cole shook his head, his breathing heavy. "You think this changes anything? You think you're a hero?" Lawson exhaled, his heart pounding in his chest. "No," he admitted, "but at least I won't be a criminal." The collapse of their lies. Briggs cracked first. His hands shook as he looked between Cole and the FBI agents, his pulse racing. "We can talk," he stammered. "I mean, we can work something out, right?" Cole's head snapped toward him. "Don't say a damn word," he snarled. Briggs ignored him. He knew they were done. He turned toward Agent Warren, his shoulders sagging. "Look," he breathed out. "We did it. We set her up. We set up others too. But it wasn't just us." Warren nodded slowly, watching as the dominoes began to fall. "Keep talking," he said. Briggs ran a shaking hand through his hair. "There's a system," he admitted. "There's a network. We weren't the only ones doing this. We were told who to pull over. We knew exactly what would happen once we did." Cole's breathing turned ragged. "Shut up, Briggs." But it was too late. The truth was already out. Outside the station, reporters had begun to gather, their cameras flashing as news of the arrests spread. The doors burst open, and Cole and Briggs were let out in handcuffs, their once proud uniforms now a symbol of disgrace. The officers who once laughed with them now stood back, avoiding their eyes. One of them muttered under his breath, "Damn." They weren't heroes. They weren't above the law. They were criminals. And today, they paid the price. From the sidewalk, Alicia Monroe stood watching. She had already walked free. And now, the men who tried to destroy her life were finally answering for their crimes. Lawson stepped up beside her. His voice was quieter now, more uncertain. Did I really do enough?" Alicia turned to him, studying him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You did what mattered." Lawson exhaled, and for the first time since stepping into the station, he felt lighter. The aftermath. As Alicia walked toward her car, she felt the weight of the past 24 hours settle in. She had been framed. She had been arrested. She had almost been buried by corruption. But now, she had won. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A message from an unknown number. "You're clear. We're monitoring the fallout. New mission details incoming." Alicia smiled faintly, tucking her phone away. Because for her, the fight never ended. There was always another case, another name, another battle for the truth. And she was always ready. As she pulled away from the station, the final nail was driven into the Cole-Briggs empire. Their time was up. And justice? Justice had arrived. The fallout from the arrests of officers Darren Cole and Matthew Briggs was immediate. By midday, news crews had gathered outside the Arlington Police Department, cameras rolling as the scandal exploded across every major news outlet. Corrupt officers caught framing innocent woman. FBI exposes widespread police misconduct in Virginia. How one woman's arrest brought down a dirty system. The headlines told the world what Alicia Monroe already knew. The system wasn't just broken. It had been built to crush people like her. But today, it was the corrupt officers who had been crushed. Alicia walked free, stepping out of the police station without a scratch. Her movements were steady, her composure unshaken, as if this had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. In reality, she had been seconds away from becoming another statistic. But now, the men who tried to bury her were the ones facing decades in prison. As she moved through the crowd of reporters, their cameras flashing, microphones pushed toward her, someone shouted, "Ms. Monroe, what do you have to say about the officers who framed you?" Alicia paused. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a calm, unreadable expression, she simply replied, "They made their choice. Now they live with it." And with that, she walked away. A broken system exposed. Over the next few days, the story dominated national news. More investigations were launched into the Arlington Police Department. Dozens of past cases were reopened. More officers resigned, some quietly, others in disgrace. But perhaps the biggest shift was with Officer Eric Lawson. Once a rookie drowning in silence, he had become the whistleblower who helped expose his department's darkest secrets. Of course, not everyone saw him as a hero. Some of his colleagues turned cold, their glares cutting through him like knives whenever he walked into the precinct. But others, they gave him nods of respect. For the first time, some of them questioned the system they had sworn to uphold. Maybe, just maybe, real change was possible. A month later, Alicia Monroe sat in a small cafe, sipping a cup of coffee as the autumn breeze rustled outside. She had no interest in the fame this case had brought her. There were no interviews, no book deals, no TV specials. She didn't need them. The real victory? She had walked away free, and more importantly, she had exposed the truth. As she took another sip, her phone buzzed on the table. A single message flashed across the screen. "New mission. Are you ready?" Alicia exhaled, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Always. She finished her coffee, stood, and walked away. Because for someone like her, there was always another battle, another lie to uncover, another system to dismantle, and Alicia Monroe was always ready. Final message. The truth always wins. Corruption thrives in silence. But all it takes is one person, one voice, to break that silence and force the world to see the truth. Alicia Monroe wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every innocent person who had ever been wrongly accused. Because no matter how deep the lies run, the truth will always find a way to the surface. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories of justice, courage, and truth. Your support helps bring these stories to life, because some stories need to be told.